Hello there, this is John Coleshaw, and I'm just slightly borrowing the voice of John Pertwee for a moment. I don't know, maybe a regeneration might happen. Yes, it happened there. Yes, and you're listening to the Sirens of Audio. Wonderful chaps. Both of them.
I know. I said it would take the force of a total fandom to attract the power away from my family. We're at the very beginning. The new start of a video podcast. Online, creators are rushing to index to their shows, editing, uploading, until minute little collections of content are created. And so the process goes on, until a community is formed. Community then becomes a tangible entity, a new birth of a Patreon and its subscribers. G'day audiophiles, this is the Sirens of Audio, the show that explores the universe of Doctor Who in the audio medium. I'm Dwayne.
And I'm Philip. G'day Dwayne, g'day audiophiles.
G'day Philip, great to see you. But joining us for this episode is the lovely Lizzie Hopley, writer and actor for Big Finish. G'day Lizzie.
G'day. I mean, I've got to, haven't I?
Nice try.
You do.
If it's coming at me, I'm going to give it back. G'day. Let's just say by the end of this interview, if I haven't adopted your accents, then I will have embarrassed myself.
I'm curious to see how you go with that. How are things over there where you are?
They're very good, yeah. Just using this as an excuse not to write my rewrites that John Dorney's waiting for. So
You may be surprised to know that you are not the first one to say that.
Writers will go to any extent.
They will.
Absolutely. Well, we appreciate you joining us for the whole episode, rather than just the standard interview in between, because there is something that we like to do before we start our interviews with our guests, Philip. You know what that is?
I do know what that is, Dwayne.
You do?
I do.
You've got to be a bit more surprised than that. We're going to jump down the rabbit hole. We're going to jump down the rabbit hole. Let's go. And we cannot have an episode without Bingo in the background, so thank you very much, Bingo. Appreciate that.
Bit of music, I'll go on.
And Bingo's in the rabbit hole with us too. So I was inspired. This question came to me when I was listening to the latest War Master box set, Solitary Confinement, and I listened to that based on your opinion of it, Philip, because you thought it was pretty good.
I did indeed.
And I know Lizzie has written at least one War Master episode. I think it may be just the one in the last one, not in the most recent one. But you wrote one in Escape from Reality. Is that right, Lizzie?
I've written a few now for Derek Jacobi's Master, and I get confused which collections they're in. I've just got another one that's due to come out soon. It's due to record soon, which I actually wrote a part for myself because I thought I'm sick of writing so much for Derek Jacobi and not actually having met him. So I thought I'd bang myself in that one. But yeah, this was an early surprise challenge from Scott Hancock because we suddenly had David Tennant available. So when I first started writing it, we didn't know which Doctor it was going to be for. We just knew that he was going to meet one of them. So the story was planned before we actually knew we were going to have Tennant in it. And and it was my first writing for Jacoby, and it was I just got hooked immediately.
Now, Lizzie, you know what I'm going to ask because I've given you some forewarning, but the fun part of the rabbit hole topic is that I don't tell Philip at all
I've got
what
no
I'm going
idea.
to ask. My question to you, Philip, so we'll start with you so you have absolutely zero time to think about it, is there's a lot of attention on antagonists these days. We seem to have a lot more interest in following antagonists like the Master, so much so that they're now the stars of their own box sets. So are heroes gone? Are we more interested in the antagonists these days? Where are the heroes gone, Philip?
I don't think heroes are gone. I think heroes are being slightly redefined at the moment. And I think we are trying to explore characters in a more complex and three-dimensional way. So in terms of the black and white hero villain, I think they're gone, and that's probably a good thing. I think we've worked out that life is far more complex than just the black and white. And so part of the consequence of that is, of course, that the antagonist gets a larger play. But there's also recognition that heroes also have dark sides. So I think a lot of our heroes, I'm a strong believer that our strengths and weaknesses are the same things, just different sides of the same coin. So I think the things that we are really good and strong at can also be our great weaknesses. And so, being strong and confident becomes arrogant and proud. And so we need to always watch what are our strengths and weaknesses, because I think they're often the same sort of things, and certainly how they're perceived by others. So no, I don't think the hero's gone, but I do think the hero has been redefined. And I don't know. I haven't had much more time to think about that. What do other people think?
That was a very good answer, Philip, for having zero forethought. What are your thoughts, Lizzie, on the topic of being more interested in antagonists these days?
From my own perspective, I always have been. So really, I'm kind of this new interest, if you perceive it that way, I'm entering a heyday, because if the spotlight's on it, then it's something that I can get on board with. I've been a horror fan all my life, and I've always wondered why. My brother and I watch all kinds of horrors, and sometimes you turn away from a film and look at each other and go, we crossed a line. We really crossed a line. And it forced me to wonder why I'm attracted to the villains and why I'm interested in horror so much. And I think it's because I enjoy being horrified. I enjoy being thrilled, because you don't have that in real life. I don't have it in real life. And it's something that produces a response that is unfamiliar and a terrifying thing. I enjoy being terrified. I know plenty of people don't. And maybe that's our fascination, in that we want continuous thrills. We want to be horrified by a new thing. And there's a lot of horror that I don't enjoy. There's a lot of horror that really does cross lines. But I remember when The Boys came out. Do you watch that series?
I haven't seen it, no.
I think it's New Zealand, and it kind of subverts the superhero genre, in that all the superheroes in The Boys, I think season 4 is about to come out now, so that they are products of consumerism. They are employed because they have these superhero powers, but they're employed for merchandise purposes, and they make movies, and the whole genre kind of went on its head. So they're not heroes in any way, but they're sold as heroes. And I just lap that up. And I think we like to see the baddies, and we are fascinated in the baddies. And it was only a matter of time when they got their own movies. Does that answer your question a little bit? I don't know. I'm biased because I love that stuff anyway.
Well, it's interesting because I've always had a fascination in true crime. So my fascination with that is why I'm interested in the motivation behind people, because some of these horrendous things that people do, I'm curious to know always what led them to down that path. And Philip, I think I may have mentioned it before, but Jack from the Caves of Androzani was a character in Doctor Who that really sparked my interest in the baddie. He was presented as a bad guy, but he wasn't the real... Well, he was the villain in the piece because he was doing some horrible things, but there was an even bigger villain who had caused Jack to go crazy in the first place and do things. So I think it's that complexity in the villain that I certainly have an interest in, because in that case, Jack, I was interested in knowing his motivation and what caused him to go that crazy in the first place. And it was a very good reason. Whereas characters like the War Master, Derek Jacobi's portrayal in particular, are a little bit different the way they do things, because they often present his master as a character who is sympathetic, but they always twist it at the end to sort of bring us all back to the fact that, no, he really is this really big, bad, evil guy. And I notice they do that a lot with the War Master. So we always kind of want to be sympathetic to his master, and we sort of can feel ourselves being sympathetic, but it always twists back to, oh yes, we realise this guy really is the big baddie. Is that what you tend to do with the War Master when you're looking at that character, Lizzie?
I think you're going to get excited at the direction he's going in under Rob Valentine now. I think we're taking that even further. And I don't know how many spoilers I can give, but it's like when we've reached the end of the line with that trick. So now we're just going to push it.
Wow.
And I remember when I first researched the War Master, Jacobi's master, before I was trying to get the voice right, because he is very, very different. And I just had to listen to it again and again. And I was compelled, not just from my fascination with horror, but so compelled by how dark he got and all the details and a lot of the clever writers introducing things that weren't fully explained, but that made you think worse than what actually happened. You know, they're like planting seeds and then your mind does the rest. And I think that partly answers maybe your question is why we're fascinated, because our capacity to imagine horrors is always worse than the thing itself. You know, like when the villain is exposed in most horror films, you're sometimes a little bit disappointed, because when your mind is given that free roam, you can come up with much worse things. And I think there's something about Jacobi that lures you in, because he's such a fabulous actor.
He's charming.
So many. Yeah, he's charming. He does it in the night garden. And then, of course, the rug is pulled out from under you. So, yeah, that trick kind of leads you down that path. And then your mind does a lot of the other things in the audio world, because it's a fabulous way to do horror, isn't it? Because, you know, you have a lot of the story, but then your mind can do so much more because you're in charge of the visuals. But yeah, we are hopefully taking him in an even worse direction with the one I've just written anyway. Yeah, I don't know how much more I can say.
I can tell you how much more.
No more.
None.
It's a fascinating topic, and as I said, I think that the breadth of our stories have got wider and wider. It's created a bigger category of both hero and villain, and it just makes for more diverse and interesting storytelling.
Because inevitably, as an actor too, Lizzie, we always find that the actors always say we love getting our teeth into the villainous parts. It always seems to be the parts that the actors love most of all. Is that true, would you say?
Oh, unbelievable. Absolutely. Most actors I've heard say that, and it's always a joy when a part comes your way that you can be a little bit villainous in. And what's wonderful about, like you say, this new interest in giving villains their own franchises is that we're exploring their psychology a lot more. So it is no longer black and white, and that part of our fascination must be in identifying ourselves in those stories. That maybe explains the sudden explosion in true crime documentaries and series on TV. Certainly we had a lot more time in lockdown to explore all of that that may be a reason why so much of it was made and is now being streamed, because we're fascinated in how we might have the capacity to do those things. And everyone's born human. I don't particularly believe people are born evil. I don't believe in a concept of evil in a religious sense. So where does it come from? And is it a product of environment, learned behavior, whatever? All of that stuff is truly fascinating. And from an actor's perspective, it's your job to come from a position of empathy. And I played Thatcher before lockdown. I didn't particularly want to do it, but I mean, to a lot of people, she's the embodiment of evil, and you have to do the research and find the humanity and find the links between you and this potential monster.
And she would not perceive herself in any way to be doing anything except what she would consider good. And so, you have to play a character who considers themselves totally good, and yet, did a few interesting things across the whole country.
Absolutely. So, it's a challenge, and it also exercises muscles that you don't use in daily life, thankfully, most of us. So it is interesting. And it's also, I have a great respect for actors who can really tread the line. When I see someone playing an out-and-out villain and they're choosing the black and white, making those black and white choices, I kind of think it cheapens things, really. I'm much more interested in someone like Jacoby, who can play a very charming villain, but in a way that no one's done before. You know, that you, even though you've seen him be vile a million times, you still get taken in by him. I find that far cleverer as an actor to watch in other people.
No, it was good to get your thoughts on that, Lizzie, and your perspective. So appreciate you sharing that. Thank you. Now, before we talk to you and focus on you, Lizzie, I want to just throw to a trailer of an episode that you did. It wasn't the first thing you did with Big Finish, but it was certainly the one that stood out most in my mind. And I'm going to throw in a trailer for a Seventh Doctor adventure called Night Thoughts, where you play. Speaking of horror, you must have really tapped into your horror, your love of horror for this role that you had. And it certainly stuck out in my memory. It's one of the best trailers Big Finish have ever done too. I'm going to throw it in right here.
Will you walk into my parlour? Said the spider to the fly.
Not all photographs bring happy memories.
There was a toy, a kid's doll on the table, and a guy called Haiti. Or something. No, Hearty, I think. And they were trying to force him to operate.
I hereby certify that I am taking my own life. No one else is involved, and no one else should be punished. 10 years ago, I made a terrible error of judgment, and God alone will be my judge. My one wish is that I am not mourned. No funeral, no flowers, no fuss. You will all know what this means.
So, this is to be a battle of the minds, is it, Doctor?
So nice of you to come unarmed.
Please don't hurt me. I've told you before. It wasn't me, it was the others. I argued your case. Please, leave me and please, go away!
Will you walk into my parlour? Said the spider to the fly.
Mother dead, father gone. We think your sister's drowned.
You know what's really freaking me out here? You. Sat here telling me all this so rationally. I've just tied up a devious clinical psychopath, and now I'm actually listening to what you've got to say.
This is a message from the future. Repeat. This is a message from the future.
Will you walk into my parlour? Said the spider to the fly.
Where the hell are you? Alright, I'm lost. And I can't see a thing. Keep calling and I'll run towards you.
No! Don't run! For God's sake, don't run!
That's it! Keep calling!
Ace! They killed her! They killed my baby! Thought she was dead! Tried to mask it out! Which one did it? Which one? I'll hunt them! I'll slice the truth out of them one by one! Gouge it out like my baby's eyes! And then And then...
Will you walk into my parlor? Said the spider to the fly.
All right, so thank you for that performance in Night Thoughts, Lizzie.
Creepy as.
Very, very creepy. What are your memories of that, by the way? Before we talk more about you, what are your memories of that particular recording?
I'm blown away you chose that one. It is one of my favourites. And I was anticipating you maybe asking me my favourites as from an actor's perspective, and Happy is right up there. Right up there. It was incredible working with Sylvester McCoy as well and that team, because he's so lovely. And this was such a dark story. And it was the time when I was doing so many of the audios for Gary Russell, and he was just trusting me with a million billion things before the TV version took off, and he knew that he could get far more famous people than me. I was on that list. So I got pulled in to do all sorts of things, and it all came from the voice. And could we create a voice that was that hideous? And I could. And he was so freaked out by it, Gary, that he actually he bought a toy rabbit and then destroyed it. And that's the picture of the rabbit on the front of the CD. And he still got it. And it freaked us all out anyway, just to see the actual real version of it. But yeah, I used to creep up behind him and do that voice in his ear. I still do it now. One thing I remember is it really actually hurts. And after a while, you kind of lose the ability to realize you're doing your vocal folds, mitigated damage. But yes, it was an absolute joy. I think the atmosphere was very much around us in the studio as well. That whole story, it was so creepy. And the sound effects, the way that story has been dealt with by the sound producers is just beautiful.
Forget the sound effects. You just gave me goosebumps just doing it then.
I'm so sorry. Sorry, Dwayne.
Oh, stop it. All right, let's go back.
We have reviewed that in a previous episode, haven't we, Dwayne? So
we did. We did an episode of Big Finish's scariest stories, and if anyone ever asks me what is Big Finish's scariest, I always pick that one as my number one. So
really, I'm so thrilled.
Yeah.
I mean,
you're scary, poor old Dwayne. Yeah, you're lovely. You are.
I'm sitting here with my little stress ball of blue tack, just getting very scared just thinking about it.
Well, let's face it, it's hard to properly scare people, especially now when we're so used to watching the news and being scared. If you can write a story and scare people without, having an X-rated side to it, then there's proper storytelling. So that's certainly not just me, that's the whole team of doing that, I think.
Absolutely. All right, well, let's go right back in time. I guess I could start off with a question. Where did you grow up?
Liverpool.
We've been speaking with lots of people from Liverpool lately.
How many... There's so many talented people that have come out of Liverpool. What is it about Liverpool that's brought out so much talent?
Oh, I don't know. It's the fact that we have to cover our accents because it's not popular. So we immediately learn to act. We immediately learn to tone it down. I don't know. We've got.
Is it really not popular? What does that accent actually mean? Because it sounds good to me. It always reminds me of the Beatles. But what does it mean? Are you sort of a lower class if you have that accent? Is that what?
I just remember going to university in Manchester to do drama when I, left school. And I didn't really have a strong accent anyway, but in Manchester, and the Manx talk like that, don't they? And Liverpool was seen as a lower class version of Manchester. So I couldn't believe that I'd not been introduced to this, so the Manx looked down on the Scousers. And then obviously, as soon as I moved to London to go to drama school, the Londoners looked down on the Northerners. So I don't understand. They kept having to move, and I seemed to get lower down. I think the Scouse accent is fascinating because it's really, I don't know about you guys, but it's really differentiated between the male and female. So the men try to talk like that, you know, they don't really open their mouths, and it's already no, like that, and that's more Beatlesy. But the women are a lot softer and nicer and a little bit sing-songy, you know, and it's all like, so no is not no, it's no.
So it's almost
it's
Welsh.
Such a different accent. Well, there you go. And my ear slides all over the place, which is why I threatened you with going Australian earlier. Yeah, massively Welsh. So it's so easy to go from Welsh and then to Indian. So, you know, it's a dangerous subject, let's face it, accents. But it is deemed, along with the Midlands, as one of the least attractive accents, apparently. And not really. I remember going for an interview to play a lawyer in a TV program ages ago, and they said, use your normal accent. And I turned up speaking like that, and they were like, no, I'm sorry, we can't possibly put you in a suit and have you as a lawyer if you're going to speak like that. So, yeah, you know, what can I say?
Okay, so
they were wrong.
Grew up in Liverpool. Who inspired you as a child?
And this is genuine, my first inspiration was the late, great Glenda Jackson. I remember watching her on TV as Elizabeth I in the big saga that she did. And I think I'd never seen a woman on telly or in film be that powerful and be that terrifying. And she obviously played her from a young girl to the monster that we recognize with the white face and the receding hair and eating away lead poisoning. But she was so formidable with that beautiful voice. And then, of course, I saw her in Morecambe and Wise doing comedy sketches and thought, well, how can someone that terrifying and that brilliant be so funny? And again, she's one of those actresses who can do both. And I thought, right, I'm going to be you.
Elizabeth I was an amazing production. I still remember it very clearly from watching it as a kid.
Do you? It was great, wasn't it? And it still stands up because, of course, those Tudor sets, you know, that's exactly what we would do nowadays anyway. Those closed off box sets, that was what Tudor rooms were like. So you can still look at it and see Robert Hardy and go, yeah, some of the great classic British actors, I think, in that as well.
So what led you to acting?
It was that, and it was Star Wars, and going to the cinema, and I wanted to be Han Solo. And just, I used to get the records of, I had an LP player, and I used to get the records of the soundtracks of the films. And by that, I don't just mean the music, I mean the actual, like the words, the score, and they would be edited versions, and I would act along with them. I'd know the script. I remember getting a version of The Black Hole on a cassette and playing it, and it was with all the music, but they had clips of the film, and I would learn it and I would mouth along and act along. I suppose it was like lip syncing, and acted in my bedroom. So instead of being one of those teenagers with a hairbrush, I'd be acting Indiana Jones in the Temple of Doom. I was a great Harrison Ford. But yeah, I didn't know that was acting, really. When I was that young, I just thought I was, you know, doing something I really enjoyed. It was only later on when I thought, oh, you can study this. Oh, you can do it.
Playing, isn't it? That's why they're called plays, because you got to play.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's interesting you bring up those old records. I think a lot of those that I listened to as a kid sort of fed my fandom of audio drama, I think, because in Australia it's not such a big thing. But I always remember, especially not as it is in the UK, because there's still audio drama on all the time with podcasts or radio or whatever, but it's not so much a thing in Australia. Is that, would you say the same, Philip?
Yeah, I think it's fair to say. But I still have all those albums. I have Star Wars, Empire, Returns of the Jedi still on LP. I actually have them all.
Yay!
And I knew them backwards too. And Genesis Daleks was the other one. And I could do the whole thing backwards. Yeah, all the lines. It's even now.
Could you do a bit of it now? Or you said could.
No. I could pull out if I had to. Will be. No, don't worry. I used to be able to say everything with the album. And I could pull it out again if I needed to.
Because I know a lot of people find listening to audio difficult, but I've never had that issue because I listened to it so much as a kid. So, even recording episodes of Doctor Who off the TV with my tape recorder, I would listen to episodes that way as well. So, because we didn't have a video recorder, of course. So that was the only way to hear those episodes or experience them off the telly. But, so that's interesting. You had those records. So when did you start acting and what sort of led you up to Big Finish?
Because I didn't just sit and act along with them. It would be very physical as well. I wanted to do all I suppose, did all my own stunts at the age of 7. But I joined a local drama group, and I discovered I had terrible stage nerves, which I've until quite recently really always suffered from. And that was a massive deal for me. I did public speaking in school and I always wanted to do it. I was so ambitious and very competitive. I wanted the biggest parts. I went up for everything and I tried very hard to get them. And in school, I had a very good school with a good drama department. So I did get some good roles, but I was always, the crippling terror was with me for a very, very long time. I went to school, they were good at drama, but they didn't tell me anything about drama schools. It was all very much, you go to university. So then I went to Manchester University to do drama, which was a non-practical course. But that's when I started writing, because I couldn't find anything that I wanted to do. All the parts that I wanted to play were male. Shakespeare roles were all male, or things I was interested in were the male roles. And I couldn't find the female ones that were as good. But while I was there, I did stand-up and I ran my own theatre company. And then I realised I had to get down south. I had to go to a drama school because I wanted to get an agent and crack into the business. And agents, casting directors then were a little more London-centric. It's not so much the case now. They do cast further afield, and there is self-taping. So you basically can audition from anywhere, which has changed the whole industry. But I went to RADA. I auditioned for RADA, and it was because it was the only one I'd heard of. I didn't audition anywhere else. Most actors or wannabe actors, they kind of audition for about 5 or 6 drama schools. For me, it was like, Royal Academy of Dramatic Art. I want to go there. And I was lucky I got in. 3 years more training. I suppose I trained so many years of university and drama school. I could have been a vet. But I came out an actor in London. So, yeah.
Why did you want the male roles? I'm just curious. What was it about the male roles that appealed to you?
They had all the lines. I suppose I wasn't so interested in being the girlfriend, the mother, the sister. And there seemed to be so much of that. When I was writing at university, there were very few writers that were addressing that. I think nowadays it's way more different. You were talking about Phoebe Waller-Bridge just before we started, Philip, and with Fleabag, and she wasn't the first, but she's certainly one of the pioneers of fabulous female writing, and creating brilliant female roles with the whole Bechdel test, is it? Where you actually have scenes in things that feature women that aren't talking about men. Things like that didn't exist. So when I was at university, I was studying a lot of plays, and the parts that I wanted were not the female roles. They were the ones that they were the protagonists. They were the everyman. They were the ones that had opinions on the world and had all the action, and they weren't there to support a man the whole time. That's why I loved Glenda Jackson.
So you toured as Katie in the Taming of the Shrew before COVID hit. So what do you think of that role? Because that's a very interesting play in terms of how it views women, and Kate's an interesting part. How did you find that?
Well, I chased that role. I hadn't played it, so I made a beeline for it and got it. We actually turned it on its head. So at the very end of the play, we couldn't decide how to do that speech where she basically says all women should obey their men and they are our owners and we do what they say. Usually it's done tongue in cheek, but we wanted to do something different. So I played it as the man. I had, he sat there, and I, Petruchio, push him off his chair and then take on his role, and said the whole thing as if I was Petruchio and he was the woman. And it was very strange thing. We actually, one of our earlier performances was in Indiana, in the Indiana State Penitentiary, to 140 male felons, and they had basically earned the right to watch the play through good behavior, and they're all there in their orange jumpsuits in this horrible concrete room, and we performed it. And I had to do that speech as the bloke, and then go into the audience and get their hands and kind of get physical with them, and it was terrifying but fascinating, because they weren't used to. Afterwards, some of them gave us feedback and said, we shut down our emotions, and this, watching this play, you reminded us that we have more than 3 emotions: terror, whatever it was that they suppressed. So yeah, that was interesting. And there were a lot of, we did a SEND, special educational needs class, where there were a lot of adult Down syndrome students, and there was one Down syndrome girl who was furious with men. She was so pro-Kate, and she practically threw her Petruchia around the room, because we were doing workshops as well as doing the show. But it's just amazing to see what, after 400 years, what a play like that can still do to an audience. Fun.
It's interesting. Earlier this evening, I was scrolling through social media, and an ad came up for a local theatre production of A Clockwork Orange with all-female cast. So have you ever heard of that? Have you ever heard of that one, Philip? I've never, and it's not a story I can imagine being done by an all-female cast, so I'm very curious now to see how they would do it. It's not the nicest of films. So how they would do it, I'm not sure. What do you think of that?
I want to watch that. I want to go in. I want to see it. I want to be in that immediately. I like that idea.
I can see potential for doing that, actually, and it would work quite powerfully. I think often we have very limited views of roles. I mean, it's especially early Doctor Who. The reason why Robert Holmes didn't write females into his stories was he didn't feel he could kill women off. And so we had no qualms about killing men left, right and centre. He didn't want to have females being killed. And so huge amounts of Doctor Who shows just left out women, because they couldn't, children and women, you can't kill them, so you didn't have them. Nowadays, we don't have the qualms of killing off women. But it's interesting how often uncomfortable it makes me feel. I think I mentioned recently, there's an audio I listened to quite recently, and they killed off the female character. It was the Peladon, of course it was, the Bride of Peladon, where there's a lovely female character who they killed off, and it was actually, I was very uncomfortable with it, because that's just not the traditional way of dealing with women. But that being said, if we're going to be more inclusive and more diverse in terms of casting, we need to be writing parts and allowing the women to die as well, I guess.
I guess, and female gangs can be terrifying. You only have to look to YouTube to see evidence of that. But Clockwork Orange seems like a fantastic idea. And who knows? I mean, if things are done right, why not?
I mean, the musical company's recently been restaged, changing the lead member from male to female and making it a female Bobby, and also swapping some of the genders around, and it's actually worked very effectively. I think we have potential to do all sorts of things. And I mean, Kate Blanchett has recently played a number. Which role? I just think where she was playing Henry V, I think. There's opportunities in terms of, you don't need to look at male female gender in certain roles, in terms of you can actually just play a part and not worry too much about the gender at times. Sometimes a bit harder. But I have heard of a recent production of Hamlet with a female Hamlet, and I think I don't see why that wouldn't, except women don't procrastinate. But I think you can get away with some of those things better than we do.
You say at times, I think you're right. It doesn't always work as well as others. I saw Glenda Jackson's King Lear and it blew me away. I saw an all-female Julius Caesar and it didn't quite work for me. Maybe because of what I know of that world and what I needed to see from that world. I just think it created more problems than anything else. But that's just my opinion. But my view tends to be, if it doesn't exist, write it from scratch for women. You don't necessarily have to do a female version of something. But Clockwork Orange seems quite interesting because it's a futuristic dystopian thing, and female gangs can be terrifying. So that would interest me more than anything else. But my instinct would be, you want to do female Clockwork Orange? I'll write you one. I'll do your own version where the women are fabulous in their own way, fabulously bad.
Yeah.
So what are some of your favourite roles outside of Big Finish? We'll get to Big Finish soon, but you worked with, you worked in a film with Peter Capaldi about 12 years ago. Did you work with him, or was that a smaller role where you didn't sort of cross paths?
Was that the Devil's Hour?
Was it Mr. Witcher? Is that?
Oh, Mr. Witcher.
Yeah.
No, we didn't cross paths in that. I've never actually, I've been in a room with him doing a read through, but we didn't act together in the same scenes, which is a real shame because he's such a lovely and funny bloke. Yeah, Mr. Witcher was fun. It was a small one, but a fun accent. I think, oh gosh, there've been so many favourites. I've been really lucky to have some interesting things to do. Funnily enough, Thatcher was a favourite one because it was such a leap for me. I know I can do accents, but I hadn't impersonated a voice before. I'm not an impersonation, I'm not an impressionist. So that was a huge challenge. And I was so proud of being in that production. And it was right before lockdown as well, before The Crown really kind of took over. And we saw the fabulous Gillian Anderson do a much better version of it than me. But yeah, I like things that are a challenge. One of the most fun jobs I've had was in Day of the Triffids. It was the remake with Eddie Izzard and Dougray Scott. And it was just one of those fabulous jobs you get where sometimes you get a job and it gets cut down a bit as they go on and you lose scenes or they get rewritten. Like I had a much bigger part in Luther and then I got cut down massively for one reason or another. This was the opposite. I had a couple of little scenes, and the first scene I had was in a mock-up of 10 Downing Street with Eddie Izzard. And I was such a massive fan of hers now, isn't it? It's funny because when I was working with Eddie, she was a him. So I get very confused because when I first met her as a him. We were both in that room and we hadn't met each other at all. And I was looking at a globe of the world, trying to focus on something other than Eddie. And I was just looking at it. And the next minute I felt this presence over my shoulder. And Eddie said, I was born there, and pointed to Yemen. And I kind of went, I was born there, pointed to Liverpool. And then we kind of just went, and my dad visited there and I first met there. And we just kind of met through the globe of the world. And we just had this weird connection throughout the scenes. I was playing a blind woman who'd been, obviously they'd seen the spores in the sky and was blind, which was a challenge all by itself. And then she took a liking to my character. I was playing this woman called Hilda. And in every scene she kept mentioning my name. And so they would have to cut to me. And so they'd have to put me in the scene. So my part increased by about 3 times. I'm in almost every scene. Because Eddie Izzard would just go, you have to take control of yourself, just like Hilda here. And they'd go, oh, God, let's get Lizzie, get Hilda in. Unfortunately, the director really responded to it and was funny and liked it. And so, I ended up kind of hanging around Dougray Scott, Eddie Izzard and Jolie Richardson because I was handcuffed to her for about a month. It was brilliant. It was so much fun because we were doing special effects and, the Triffid stuff and everything. And it was, sci-fi is great, isn't it?
It was a great series. I was really surprised it didn't go to a second series because it was so well made and quite terrifying too.
So how did you end up working for Big Finish? It was obviously as an actor first of all. Did you know about Big Finish or did Gary come looking for you?
No, it was actually through the wonderful Conrad Westmass, who played Keres. And we were cast in the same production of Abigail's Party that went on a massive tour. And there were quite a few big names in it. And yet at the stage door, there was always a queue of people wanting Conrad. And so some of the names were going, well, who are you? What do people want? Because he was understudying the role of Tony. He did actually have a role in the main thing. And everyone was going, who's this man? And they were all obviously after Keres's autograph. And as soon as I heard of this, I was, being a Doctor Who fan anyway, I said, right, I want in. And he suggested me to Gary, and Gary got in touch and brought me in, and that was that. And obviously the first job was terra firma with Keres. And I mean, my first job being killed by Daleks, being an actual Doctor Who assistant, albeit in a parallel universe, I still count, was, I haven't looked back. It was brilliant.
You were mentioned by name on television, so you are canon.
Thank you. Yeah, I am canon. I am canon. There are T-shirts with my name on it.
They are coming. You always knew they would. And that is important.
Important?
Being you, knowing what you are and being.
Well, yes. Wouldn't you agree?
But who are you? Who are you really? You destroyed my world. I have created a new one. I was completely alone, Doctor. Alone because of you. Perhaps, Doctor, it is not your destiny you should fear. Perhaps it is your past.
We'll be dead soon anyway.
Do you know something will be dead?
Because I'm the Doctor. And whatever happens, God, I never ever.
How can I be dead?
I remember! We need the Daleks. We need one universe, one mind, a single pure Dalek mind. We do not need you, and yet like you, we must cower here in the darkness. We must cower and await our final destiny!
In those earlier days, I think you worked a bit with Katie Manning as well. You did some Iris Wild Times, is that right? Now, she does a lot of voices too, like you do some interesting voices. Did you ever get together and have a voice-off with Katie?
Oh, how I wish. I mean, there's still a chance, right? She's still doing it. She's still out there. One of the most glorious people I've ever worked with. I can't believe the energy she has. She's such a beautiful human being. And for her to make Iris Wildtime work and the crazy storylines, it was unbelievable. I remember I gave birth to a double-decker bus in that series, and that's a highlight for me. But yeah, just a glorious human being. And she also did an audio version of her own life story, which Nick Briggs edited, which is beautiful. She narrates that, and it's a very, I got hold of that and listened to it, and it was a glorious thing. But yeah, I've just written for her Return of Jo Jones recently as well, which I'm thrilled to have done. So actually write for her as well as work with her. No, she's a hoot. With such a laugh doing that.
So writing for Jo, as a Doctor Who fan, were you a huge Doctor Who fan or just a casual? And do you draw on that fandom for your writing?
I thought I was huge, and then I met the big Finnish crowd and realised I know nothing. I'd grown up with the fabulous Tom Baker. I did work almost with him once on Randall and Hopkirk. Haven't worked with him as the Doctor yet. I've had 2 opportunities, and I was working as an actress both times, so I wasn't able to play the part in the studio with him. And oh my gosh, kick myself. So that's still on the wish list. But yeah, I was a massive fan of him, and I absorbed everything I could of that whole era. And it broke my world when he regenerated. But then, of course, I absolutely loved the Davison era as well, and got as much into that. And so I couldn't believe that I could care about it in the same way. But I used to read the books, the Target books. And when it wasn't on telly, I would just absorb all of those. I'd go to the library when I was in school, and you were only allowed 6 books out, and there were 7 days in a week. And I couldn't bear it. There was one day where, because I used to read one a day. It's already little, weren't they? I used to write down the lines that I loved as well, like some of the best lines. So yeah, I considered myself a massive fan, and then I suppose I grew out of it a bit, and it went off the telly. And I had no idea that Big Finish had kept it alive all those years. How I wish I'd known about it sooner, so I could have not had that big gap.
A lot of writers actually feel that they've been inspired by the Target novelizations that they read. Do you think that those helped you get a sense of writing through Uncle Terence?
I'm sure they did. Do you know what, Dwayne? I'd never thought of that before, but reading inspires your writing. But also I was making notes, and I still have notebooks from when I was that age, and any line that I thought was clever or particularly funny or unusual, I would write down, completely to plagiarize to future date. I'd make notes of lines that I thought were really cool, and I would do that from the telly, from films, and clearly from books as well. I would make sure I wrote it all longhand, and I was writing my own science fiction at night as well. I wrote, and funnily enough, I did steal some ideas from that for a story I did, Babe and the Butcher, with Colin. I stole an idea that I'd actually written when I was about 13, 14. So yeah, I guess I've been writing since I don't know if I borrowed some of those lines, but I'm sure Terence Dicks was a massive influence on me. So must have done. That's a nice full circle for you. That wasn't Dicks, was it? Oh, it was Andrew Smith, but that was one of my favorites.
Very good. So from acting for Big Finish, what led you to writing? Do you remember what the first story was? I didn't look at all the dates. Was it Dark Shadows? Was that one of your first? It was
Dark Shadows. Well done. I think it was Collingwood Christmas. I think.
Big picture of you on the cover?
Dun, dun, dun. Well, if you're going to write for Big Finish.
It wasn't
write it for yourself?
It wasn't Kingdom of the Dead was the series, wasn't it?
Was it an Ivanka Romano one? The first one I wrote. I think she might have been referred to or have a small part. It certainly wasn't. When I started writing, I didn't think, immediately I'm going to put a role in for myself. That came later. It was more, oh my gosh, can I do this? I'd already written for radio though, and had things on Radio 4 and Radio 3, and had some success in that arena. So I'd already got through that whole thing of writing for audio, because it is completely different. You think your arms have been cut off because you don't have the visuals, and then you realize, oh, hang on a minute, you've got all the visuals because you're putting them in the mind of the listener. So audio is so much freer, and I'd had that big realization. But it was really learning the world of which I knew nothing about. That's always terrifying when someone presents a new box set and you've got to go, oh, right, now I have to learn what Dark Shadows is, and I know nothing. But I was led through that, as you are by whoever you work with. That in that case it was Joe Lidster. I've since been led through things by Matt Fitton, John Dorney. You enter a new world, and there's always someone there who can go, don't worry about that. You write the story, you pitch it. We'll fill in all the blanks and give you the stuff to read and watch. And so you educate yourself about that universe. But yeah, that was my first world I entered.
When producers speak on extras, producers, directors, anyone involved in commissioning writers, they often say your name and say, well, we turn to Lizzie when we want something really fast. You're known for being a fast writer. What's the secret to pumping out a good story quickly?
Oh, I didn't know that. That's a really lovely thing to know. I suppose. Oh goodness. Lockdown was a massive training ground for me. I suppose I'd had a lot of experience beforehand in that I'd written for radio as well. I am a prolific writer, even though I haven't had as much produced as I've written. Every writer will say that. So I'm used to churning it out. And I suppose I'm good with deadlines. As soon as someone says I need it by Thursday, my brain is already planning that time and making sure that nothing gets in the way, and I'll just do that work. I think I know the ones you're referring to. I think it was early in lockdown when I was commissioned to write a prose version of Precious Annihilation. And it was a very quick one because we suddenly had Tennant, and because he was available because of lockdown, and it was with River Song and David Tennant. And suddenly David got in touch with me and said, he's become available. Can you turn it from prose to, can you suddenly write the audio version? I went to say, yeah. And they went, by tomorrow. So I suppose, and John Dorney said this as well, David Tennant is very good to, and Alex Kingston as well, they're very good to write quickly for, because they're very punchy and their voices just stick in your head, and you just, the speed of their rhythms is a good one. So you get on that pace, you get on the kind of hamster wheel quite quickly. But it was during lockdown I particularly learned to write fast, because it was the only way I could survive. I was trapped in my house and didn't have a mic set up to do any professional work myself as an actor, which was a stupid thing, but where I live has too many sounds bleeding in. And my husband was off working because he was a frontline worker. So I just took every single job they offered me, and Big Finish kept me alive, because it not only gave me money to live on, it also kept my brain from atrophying. I couldn't do any acting, so I did it through the writing. And that's a wonderful thing when you can't get up in the morning and go, I think I'll act today, because unless someone gives you permission, you can't do it. Whereas you can write. You can get up and go, right, I'm writing today, and no one can stop me. They might not produce it, but no one can stop me doing it. And they kept coming and they kept coming. So I just got faster and faster at knowing how to write quickly. I think one thing I learned was to front load the work so that you do all the work on the planning. Treatment. My treatments get very long. And I learned that from reading a book on James Cameron and how he writes. He kind of writes a short novel before he actually turns it to script. He just, writes the whole thing down in prose and then puts it in script form. And in that way, he does everything all at once. He puts in the visuals, he puts in the psychology, what people's thoughts are, and then he just kind of, it avoids being on the nose, and it means that you do a lot of your biography work and a lot of your structural work all at once. And so that's the fast. I think it came from, you don't get paid a huge amount. Big Finish are very generous, but it's not like a massive film commission or telly commission where you're going to get thousands of pounds. Sorry, but I'm not biting the hand that feeds me. But it's you kind of do the work that you're paid for, and I'm not going to spend months and months, especially when you've got lots of them. So you make sure you do the most amount of work possible for the first draft, so that first draft doesn't need many more drafts. I think that became popular.
Do you ever have periods of writer's block?
Oh gosh, yes. And I can lie awake. And it used to be that I would go for a long walk and try and plot something. I remember I did one, a unit one, Agents of the Volprene, where it was called The War Factory. And I had so many characters to incorporate. And Andrew was saying, wonderful, Andrew Smith was saying, yeah, but they've got to be the main focus. Oh, but they've got to be the main. And that person's got to be the main focus as well. I'm like, all these characters have to be the main focus, including the baddies. And I did not know how to bring it all together. It was also a really timey-wimey story, which I tend to stay away from because I find my brain doesn't work in that way. But actually what I've done now is go for the timey-wimey ones because I find it a challenge. And also I tend to think if you're not good at something, just do it more and then you'll get good at it. Doesn't always work. So yeah, I remember going for a long walk to try and work out War Factory, and I got back again and I hadn't. And it was the first time I'd been thwarted, and it was horrendous. And that took so long to thrash out the plot for. And it is frightening because you kind of just take for granted that your brain can solve everything. And occasionally you can't. And I mean, you always do. It's usually because you phone up Matt Fitton and go, Matt, can you work out that ending? Yeah.
Well, speaking of timey-wimey, there was one story that came to mind when you said that, which specifically isn't as timey-wimey. And I think I recall from the extras that they said your brief would have been to do Die Hard in Space, and that's Mutually Assured Destruction from Time Lord Victorious. So a little bit different, working with lots and lots of Daleks with all different... How did you go with those Daleks, different personality Daleks in your head, working with that? That would have been a different kind of a challenge, I guess.
It definitely was. I just wrote to Nick Briggs, who fortunately I knew from Terra Firma, and we'd stayed really good friends. And I was so starstruck when I met him. And I just said, can you give me some pointers? And he wrote a really lovely email back with, the kind of the characterizations and what to keep in mind when you're writing for Daleks. And that helps so much. Also, it was on a Dalek time ship, so you had the different characters as well, like strategist, scientist, and that helped a little bit. You also can't go mad, because I've done a Dalek one recently as well, and I had to cut the number of Dalek characters down, because brilliant as Nick is, there is a limit to how many of the Dalek voices he can do in one story without the listener becoming confused. So you always have to think of the person listening the whole time. But that was a gift. It was the first job I did for Matt. And I remember hearing his voice out of the blue. I'd never met him. And he just said, fancy doing Die Hard on a Dalek ship? You don't say anything other than yes. And I was a bit scared, because I knew it would involve a lot of technical stuff as well. It was not something that I could just chat my way out of. It wasn't going to be character based. It was going to be timey-wimey. It was going to be very technical. He had to come up with really clever things all the way through. And I just thought, right, I'm just going to have to invent them clever things then. And do you know what? You can. And that was quite a milestone for me, that story, in terms of thinking, when you read scripts by other fabulous writers, and we've got so many of them, why they've not been taken on for the telly, I do not know. So that's a little bugbear we can come back to. But some of the wonderful scripts you read, and you just think, how did your mind come up with that? And you just have to go, well, my mind can come up with it. If I just have a problem, I need to solve it, and I'll just invent the gump from the technical doodah, and then there you go. It sounds great. That's what sci-fi is.
From Big Finish Productions.
Divert power to shields.
Diverting power will reduce navigational control.
Seal the breach.
We have lost outer saucer sections, primary laboratory, weapon store, and payload module.
Doctor Who, Time Lord Victorious. Mutually Assured Destruction.
I'm just a rat in the skirting boards causing havoc. Now, where is it?
You are the Doctor. Stop!
You've been cooped up in the lab too long, forgotten how to shoot in zero gravity.
You will learn. You cannot trap the Doctor. He is too dangerous. Your actions have jeopardized the survival of the Dalek Time Squad.
You are looking for the TARDIS.
Well, you're a bright one. What have you done with it?
Purge all aliens. Exterminate. Exterminate.
Big Finish. We love stories.
Now, Time Lord Victorious, of course, was a multimedia event, I think they called it, or a platform. Lots of different things going on across books and comics and things like that. And of course, that was then. We've now got Doomsday, which is coming up, which you've written an episode for the forthcoming Big Finish set. Well, tell us about working on that kind of platform, do you have to be concerned about what's going on in the rest of the series to write your story, or are you just given the basic elements and you write around them? How does it work as a writer?
This one was different because for the last one, I was very much given this is your starting point. This is where you need to end up. Anything else you're worried about, we will fix. So it was a much clearer thing. I had to get from A to B and I could work out how to do it. The Doom, it was entirely new venture, and I was asked to pitch a while ago, and I had an idea immediately for it. I have a kind of stable of them, and sometimes you throw out the same one for a lot of story boxes, and it's not picked up for ages. This one I'd not told anyone about, and I just knew it fitted immediately. We were all given, once we were on board, we were all given a kind of a bit of an introduction to the character and the concept. And then once our pitch had been accepted, we then got given a much greater outline of the whole thing. But it didn't really involve anyone else's story. And still how you get into the story and leave it, I'm amazed that I must have just hit certain things correct the first time, because I had few rewrites on it really. But I was so thrilled that the story was picked up for the penultimate hour. That was a massive honor, really. I don't know how. You just have to put your trust in everyone else, in the editors and John Ainsworth, who's a genius anyway, but putting the whole thing together, they know how it's going to work. And you've got the two pros, you've got Goss's beginning and ending, so you've got geniuses at work behind the scenes. You just have to do your bit as well as you can. And it just happened that the villain in mine, or the villains in mine, was a particularly nasty idea. And I suppose it stood out for some reason.
Now, this is what I'm very, very excited about that you're doing, just recently announced, is the next audio novel, which is virtually a 60th anniversary release. Not only is it a multi-doctor story, it's a multi-companion story performed by John Coleshaw, The Box of Terrors. The audio novels are very different to what Big Finish normally does, I'm speaking as a listener too. You've got to invest yourself a lot more in these audio novels, but I think the payoff is really good considering the ones I have done. I think I haven't listened to maybe one of them as yet, but I'm very excited about this. Tell us about how this story came about.
Oh, well, I'm so proud of this, and it came from David Richardson. He trusted me with it and approached me a couple of years ago with the concept. I just turned an audio script into a prose script because of the unavailability of Freema Agyeman. It was a Martha Jones story, and I'd written it. I turned the script I'd already written in prose out at the hospital. So I'd already delivered some prose to him, and he was keen on me doing more. And so when he approached me with this, I don't really think I realized how big it was at the time. And slowly it began to dawn on me. I had a couple of strong ideas, and I was trying to thinking from a listener's perspective, knowing that they weren't going to invest in a very long journey, how I could give them some really visual worlds and events that would impact and make it, a really strong opening and as strong places to visit. So that I had two very strong ideas for that I fused together and came up with the initial premise. It changed a lot along the way. I don't know how many spoilers I can give. I should probably give none at all. But yeah, in terms of who I could use, what was licensed, what wasn't, right until the last minute before it was actually announced, there were changes made, not obviously to story because it had been recorded, but to titles and what we were allowed to feature and what we weren't. Fine. I've learned, I'm so long in the tooth now as a writer, you just learn to go with it. You can't have it, so you can't have it. There's no use going, bleh. You just think of something as good. But yeah, 60,000 words is a lot of words. And I also had jobs as well. You know, this is a big paid job, but I had acting work too. So I was also abroad during a lot of it. I was doing workshops overseas for the RSC. So I was having to really monitor my time. And when I realized how long I was taking to write, you then do the maths and go, okay, this is going to be a good couple of months. In the end, I had just over October. It was mostly about five weeks to do it. 60,000 words. Why I haven't got a bookshelf of published novels to my name, I don't know, because I've proved I can now write one in a month. So what is my excuse? I don't know. That's my personal shame. But again, the trick was to front load it with the planning. I had to plan the whole thing meticulously, so I knew exactly what was happening in each section. Dividing it down into 6. I already had the structure of the hours audio in my brain because I'd done so many of them, 10,000 words. I know what that feels like to go through. It's weird. I describe it as almost like a skeleton. Each length of script has a skeleton to it. If you're writing a 90-minute film, it has it moves, but it's a certain length and it has a certain structure. If you're writing a 45-minute afternoon play for Radio 4, it has a certain structure. This was the first time I'd taken on something that was 60,000 words long, 6 hours. So I had to basically create that 6 hours and hold that skeleton in my head. And that was a very, very different thing. But the beauty is you can write such detail, such fabulous characterization. And knowing that John Coleshaw, who is an absolute genius and a lovely, lovely man, was going to be reading it. I just thought, well, I can give him anything. I can give him anything to do and he'll be brilliant. That helped a lot.
So we know the Third Doctor. We know the Fourth Doctor. Were there any challenges writing for the Sarah Jane that's with the Third Doctor, the Sarah Jane that's with the Fourth Doctor? Because we've talked about it recently, Philip. I can't remember when we were talking about that, but there's a slightly different dynamic between those two Sarah Janes.
Yeah, well, I mean, before I start talking, what were your thoughts on it? I mean, you've not heard it yet, but what would you imagine the difficulty?
I guess you would have done a good opportunity to do your research and watch a lot of the old episodes back, I guess. But I think the Sarah Jane that was with the Third Doctor, she was a lot more straight down the line. She was more interested. I think she was more independent. Personally,
and she was,
I think that's it. And she softened a lot when the Fourth Doctor came along, and they became much more interdependent. Whereas I feel with the Third Doctor, she was along for the ride, but she was still very much her own person. Not that she's not her own person with the Fourth Doctor, but there's more of a, I don't know. There seems to be more of an attachment between the two characters of Sarah Jane and the Fourth. That's my view, anyway.
That's a lovely thing to say.
I'd talk in terms of the fact that, I mean, she forced herself on the Third Doctor. She wasn't she forced herself into the TARDIS and, so there's a different relationship, though she's certainly got a lot of caring and you see the emotion grow over the John Pertwee era. So she's the one in tease at the Regeneration and the whole Tease Sarah Jane line, which still breaks me up every time. But yeah, by Tom Baker, they became mates and friends, and there's less paternal care. I think the John Pertwee's Doctor does a paternal care for her, but as I said, she's fiercer, more independent. Not that she's not still strong in Tom Baker's era, but yeah, she has softened, and she's now wanting to travel, and that's the fun of it all. Which is why when she can't travel anymore, it just breaks your heart when the Doctor dumps on Earth.
I think I had a head start with her because we did a lot of to and froing about who we were going to have as companions, and really I'm thrilled that I was allowed to choose, really, because it could have been Leela and Joe, or Leela and Sarah and Joe, and I think it was me that floated the two Sarahs. Apologies to Roland Moore, who's my amazing editor, and David if it wasn't, but it was kind of floated, and then we went, we can't possibly do that. I mean, God help John Coltrane, God help the reader, the listener. And then I thought, hang on a minute, I'm always attracted to things that are difficult. And I thought, if there's a way of doing this where it works, imagine that, because that would just be extraordinary. And also, I was dealing with a character that I just loved so much. Not that I didn't love the others and love Leela so much, but she's my era. Sarah Jane was so my era as well. And I was interested in her prior to that. The younger version I obviously knew because, we can all watch BritBox, and I've seen all of those now. And I wanted to deal with the same person who had had more experience and seen more horrors and more terrible things. Because, I mean, the Sarah Jane I knew from the Tom Baker years had awful things happen to her, and had nearly died and had seen her doctor die, and knew the risks. So that was that difference in experience was interesting to me. I thought, well, they are two different women almost. So yeah, I took it in terms of the slight experience gap, meaning a bit more of an age gap. So even though they're not much different in age, or John Pertwee, Sarah, was almost not quite mothered by the other one, but there was a little bit more of a maternal protection or an elder sister protection in terms of, yeah, go get her, but I've got to be careful about her because she doesn't yet know what's out there. She knows a bit, and also the fear that's in the younger Sarah of what's going to happen, getting to know the older doctor, getting to know Tom Baker's doctor and going, who are you? I don't know you. That it's just fascinating to me. I mean, we all know how interesting it was seeing Rose accepting, David Tennant's doctor, and of course then passionately wonderful relationship that came out of it. But that thing of the companion having to accept, same companion accepting a different doctor and getting to know the different doctor, and of course here we've got one that knows both and one that knows one, and I just wanted to get into that. And with prose you can, it's not just like it's got to be action audio for an hour. With prose you can get into their minds and get a little bit more forensic with those relationships, and I think it pays off.
It never ceases to amaze me, particularly with Big Finish, but in lots of different Doctor Who too, that it's always coming up with something new. And this is something that's never been done before. I can't recall if it's been done ever before. Has it been done in the books, do you recall, Philip? Or?
Well, I've never read the books, but as far as I know, it's never been done. So
certainly a first for me. So thanks for that, Lizzie. It's very exciting. I'm very excited about this one.
Thank you. Me too. I was so proud of it when it finally was accepted, and it involves, I can't give any spoilers, but it involves a few of my most favourite characters ever. It was like I got to open a toy box and pull out my very, very favourite people and put them all together and have an adventure with them. And it's just, yeah, big thrill. And that you say, Dwayne, about Big Finish, that you're surprised people can come up with something new all the time. It is surprising, isn't it? You think, I mean, we have our motto, for the love of stories. And I remember when I was first asked to pitch stories, I kind of thought, oh my God, I'm going to run out, and I'm going to, if I waste that on that, I won't have another one for this. And, you kind of think there's a finite number of stories in your head. And then, I'm facing now my, 18th year? Oh my God, show my age. Some of that was just the acting, but then all those years of pitching stories, you think, nah, I mean, they say there are 7 stories. Is it 5 or 7?
7.
7 stories, and look at how many combinations of that we can come up with. So, we all have the same tropes and the same, oh, this is a monster story, and this is a get out of jail story, or the whatever. But there are so many permutations, and the Who universe is nuts big. I mean, I thank God there are people like you guys and people like the people I work with who know that universe inside out. So when you pitch a story about monk the screen, someone can go, it's been done, before you do any more work on it. It's like, done that one in such and such, and you go, oh.
All right. So what else are you looking forward to in the coming months and years ahead, Lizzie?
Ooh, well, I think, again, I've got to be careful with spoilers, but I have just written myself apart, and I had to beg to do it. But then the response came, yeah, sure. So I'm going to meet, hopefully, even if it's across the airwaves, a massive hero of mine, and be acting with them. And it's a fun part as well. So I haven't done that in a while, actually. Done little bits and pieces, but actually doing the acting part is one of the best bits.
Is acting your love? Are you an actor who just writes because you need to, or could you consider yourself a writer now who acts?
Oh, I can't choose between. It's the age-old question, Philip, but I've always done both. You know, when I was telling you about running around my bedroom acting at Indiana Jones, I was also writing my own versions of Doctor Who and Star Wars. So I've always done both. They've always gone hand in hand. But sometimes it is better to hand over to someone else. You know, I love writing for people. If I think they're brilliant, then I'll write endlessly. It's hard when you're writing for someone, which doesn't happen in Big Finish, but when you're kind of writing something or it gets cast with someone you're not that, and you go, but we've got so many fabulous actors, it's so easy to write for them. And usually I'll write it, I won't write it for myself, but as I'm writing it, I'm going, I know how to do this. I know exactly how to do that, and it needs to be that. And so you kind of go, oh, who are they going to get to do it? You know, and not that I'm saying that with any arrogance of only I can do it, but you kind of go, actually, it'd just be easy if you just put me in this one. But yeah, I'm looking forward to that. There are so many things I want to do. I want to create a villain. I want to create a big character. It's wonderful when you can revisit characters you've created in other stories, such as, you know, aliens that you've created for some stories, you can bring them back in others and they get more and more popular. But I'd like to have a bash at creating someone quite massive. And it's a question of, I suppose, pitching those things sometimes and them having room for them. There is so much going on in Big Finish that I don't even know about. I pitched an idea for a box set a while ago and there was just no room for it. And you go, oh, right. So you're booked up for the next 10 years. And there's stuff that I've written 10 years ago, or, well, it feels like that suddenly gets recorded. Yeah, and hasn't come out yet. You're like, oh my goodness, you know, that's still there waiting to happen. So yeah, that's something I'd like to do. That I haven't written for all the Doctors, you know, and there are some who we've yet to persuade to come to Big Finish, obviously, aren't there? So that opens up a myriad of things.
Absolutely. I just want to quickly go back to something you raised before. And when you mentioned that there are some people in Big Finish, you don't understand why they're not working for television or something like that. My immediate thought is John Dorney. I think he's pretty incredible. Matt Fitton is another one. Why is it, do you think? Is it a skill that they... Is there more saturation in television writing and they sort of get lost in that, or what's the story? Because they are incredible storytellers and writers.
I don't know. I have my theories, and some of them might not be popular. If I was a showrunner or producing a show as big as Doctor Who, obviously you don't want to go wrong. You want reliable writers, but either they don't know. I mean, I can't believe they're not aware of the top strata of our writers, and I would include John Dorney, yes, Rob Valentine, Tim Foley. Oh my goodness, and he's a published writer. Lisa McMullen, who writes for television anyway, so she's tried and tested. Roy Gill, you know, they are some of our top draw writers, and they've produced again and again hits, and they can also do humor, they can do crazy, they can do really heartbreaking stuff. If I was aware of their work, why would you not use them? And I can't believe that some people right at the top of Doctor Who, you know who I'm talking about. I can't believe that they're not aware of these writers. I've been in Zoom meetings for box sets with these people. So they are aware of the talent there. So either it's partnerships with those producers, in the TV companies themselves that go, no. I think there's a little bit of fan fiction snobbery. I'm sorry, but there is. I know when my literary agent, my acting agent, covers my
Can
writing.
I just interrupt you there? What is that, Lizzie? What's fan fiction snobbery exactly?
I may have invented it, but I don't think I have. But I do think there is a thing of, you write fan fiction. So it's not, Big Finish is a company that commissions writers and pays writers. There is also fan fiction that exists on the internet and used to exist before the internet, where people aren't paid. They just love writing and they love characters and they want to write something that puts this character and that character together in a new situation because they want to keep it going. And wasn't Twilight that? Wasn't 50 Shades of Grey that? A version of Twilight? And Twilight was a version of something else? I don't know. Twilight was fan fiction, wasn't it? But it reimagined. I can't remember, but I think it was. But certainly 50 Shades of was fan fiction about Twilight. And obviously those franchises have earned their writers a huge amounts of money. I consider the writers that write for Big Finish professional writers, because to be a professional writer, you need to be commissioned and paid to write. And then your writing needs to be then produced, which all of our work is. And the standards are very, very high. The fans will tell you that. If something's not popular, they won't buy it. The feedback won't be good. So there is a system. And some of the audios that Big Finish produces is better than anything you'll see on Netflix. It's just a different format. So I don't think audio is seen as it's seen as a lesser form of artistic work. Like they say, oh, you've got a great face for radio, or, oh, she's got a great career on radio. I hope that's not the case, because now with podcasts, audio format is becoming so huge and it's so freeing, and all actors, look at how many famous actors do voice work. They all love doing the voices for cartoons or gaming characters or audio adventures. They love it because it's so much fun. So maybe the audio thing does have a little bit of it's Telly's, younger sister or sibling without the visual. I don't know if that's true. But the fan fiction thing is something different. And it's something I found there's a slight snobbery with certain literary agents. I know my literary agent, before they retired, wasn't so keen on me doing Big Finish because they considered it fan fiction. And that was when I first thought, and I never mentioned I used to write for Big Finish because I thought, that's fan fiction. And then you kind of go, hang on a minute, this is some of the most exciting work I've ever produced and the most brilliant work I've ever encountered from other people. So sort of, sorry, I'm not sure what your language allowances for science of audio, but I do get very angry when I think of it. And then when I tried to get a new literary agent and I think of the stuff that I send them, I've been advised not to send some of the audio stuff or not to put it on my CV. And you think, well, this is really disappointing, because I have learned so much about the writing process. I was so prolific during lockdown. I think I wrote one less than John Dorney, and it was pretty much one story, one audio a month. And he's one of the most prolific writers I know, and never loses his standards. He's prolific, but he's still brilliant. And how is that possible? How is he not being someone like that, not being snapped up by TV and film? The guy's a genius. People knows he exists, and there are many more. I'm hoping I'm wrong, and that the fan fiction snobbery isn't as big a thing as I think, but something's going on, because if I knew there was that much talent around, Big Finish will be losing a few writers. If I was in that position, I'd be plucking them out and going. And also the amount of, I've got box sets behind me from myself, but certainly from other Big Finish writers, and you just go, that story, why isn't that massive? Why isn't that, like the only one I can think of is Rob Shearman's Dalek. And that was changed, that was almost changed completely so that it was top of fame, wasn't it? I read recently, wasn't even
when they're talking, when they almost lost the rights to the Dalek, yeah.
That's right. And it went through a lot of changes, the script, but it was so exciting to think that a Big Finish writer could have written a story that was that brilliant and that fabulous, and it was, that it would be turned into an episode for the TV. Why that isn't happening all the goddamn time, I don't know, because there are stories out there and you just think, well, I can list many on the TV series that are not as good as that.
Yeah, not even close. Yeah, not even close.
Not even close. Not even close. There are some certain episodes on telly, and it goes with anything, long-running series. There are going to be some episodes you go, I can't watch that. It's so bad. It's so bad. But to me, it's self-evident, and I'm not a genius, but I look at some of it and I go, I could point you in a direction of 20 that one of these writers has done. Why you're not using them, I do not know. There must be some kind of reason other than ignorance, because it can't be ignorance. Anyway, there you go. It's sad. It is sad. But hopefully it will change.
I do agree with you to a certain extent. However, the Big Finish fan side of me says, I hope you guys never get pulled away. Because I would,
you for saying that, Dwayne.
Especially if we were talking about John, there would certainly be a big hole in the Big Finish catalogue, I guess, if John was pulled away and given a lot of work somewhere else.
I know. So, I almost finished off by saying something like that myself. I would be doing a disservice to Big Finish if I suddenly tipped off.
Well, we've probably got 10 years. We've got 10 years of stories of John to probably come out still in terms of what's already written in the can.
We have. And what's incredible is you have a conversation with Dorney, and he will just give you an idea that is genius, and you go, "Are you serious? Can I use that?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, I'll come up with something else." And you're like, he's got such generosity of spirit as well. If I have a good idea, I will guard it with my life because I'll know I'll need it at some point. But he's so, it just oozes out of him. And you think he needs to be in everyone's writer's room because he's a problem solver. Matt Fitton, problem solver. How is Matt Fitton not earning billions in some writer's room in LA or whatever? Not that he'd probably quite happy in Oxford. And we want him, exactly. No one should take these people. What am I saying? Scrap all of that. Cut it off. But the thing is, these people are so brilliant, so prolific, they could do both. John Dorney would never leave Big Finish. It's in his blood. It's his, it's in his heart. We've all got so much from doing it. I love doing it. And he's always complaining about, he never has enough time for his own writing projects. And I feel the same. Like I said, why haven't I written 82 novels? And it's like, well, you've also got to get paid. Big Finish pays us. But also we really love doing it. So why would you stop?
Well, on that note, thank you so much for sharing so much of yourself with us, Lizzie. And until television or wherever Hollywood snatches you away, we look forward to many, many more Big Finish stories to come. Thank you.
Thank you so much, guys. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Stick around because we want to get a recommendation. Is that okay?
Absolutely, yeah.
Fantastic.
No, it can't be. My time is up, Doctor. I need your help.
From Big Finish Productions, The War Master, Self-Defense.
Where is my ship?
We were hoping you'd be able to tell us that. We were looking for others.
Other survivors.
Survivors of what?
A crash? An accident? I don't remember.
Who are you more scared of? The Daleks or your own people?
One more word and I will kill you, Cole.
Yeah, because if you just kill enough people, that will solve all your problems, won't it?
Why are you doing this? It's an interesting hypothetical, isn't it? Lord
President Doctor. Under your guidance, the Time Lords might have changed, become more sympathetic, more open.
What do you want from me?
I want you to stay and witness my fate.
Oh, it's back, and it's heading this way. Quick, get hold of anything you can. You might need it. Come on, grab a torch. Come on,
hurry!
You think you can survive me? I am the Master, and I will destroy you!
No, you can't just end it there.
Big Finish, for the love of stories.
Well, thanks for still being with us, Lizzie. Appreciate that.
You're very welcome. I can't believe that you've listened to me for this amount of time.
I could listen to you for that amount of time again.
Punctuate my
we only started to scratch the surface of some of the stuff you've done. So
absolutely,
yeah, so much more to talk to you about.
We've got to leave it open so you come back at some point.
Oh yeah, talk about all the acting stuff I've done this year.
Exactly,
that's gonna be fun. Yeah.
So that only leaves us one thing to do, and that is to talk about some recommendations. Now, Lizzie, normally we recommend an audio or any. It's usually audio related, but it doesn't have to be. And I would love to ask you first to go first, but I can't because it is always Philip's turn to go first for some strange reason. Go, Philip.
Yeah, that's not my reason. That's all I can say. I thought, well, we've got Lizzie on board. I think we should recommend some Lizzie stuff. So this afternoon I was going through my favourites, Lizzie, trying to find my favourite one. And it was a struggle because I think recently I've talked about Riley Takes on the World and the Wishing Tree. I've mentioned that a couple of weeks ago. Peladon and the Poison of Peladon, which is a wonderful story with River Song. I love her Babe in the Butcher story. She did the second story in the box set there, which is actually, it's quite heart-wrenching because she creates this wonderful character, no spoilers, creates a wonderful character and then does something truly awful to this character, like just hideous. What a wicked, evil woman she is. So trying to work out which was my favourite one, and there's also a couple of great Torchwoods there as well. But the one I really want to recommend is my favourite story of Lizzie's, which is from the Time Lord Victorious box set, which is Mutually Assured Destruction. So we spoke about it at length earlier, and so I was glad when it came up. I found this to be one of the most exciting stories I've heard for ages because it does not lay up at any point. The energy in this story goes on and on. I know, once again, we did speak about it at the time, and I know we did a review of it, which actually we haven't really, I think we've released that review on our
We did it for
platform.
Another podcast. We haven't put it out on our
We did for another podcast, and we haven't released it. At some point, we've got to do our own Time Lord Victorious releases because we reviewed all of them for another podcast. But this is that one again when we went through it all. It is just, it doesn't let up. And I think few Big Finish stories put as much pressure and tension on as that one does, because at no point is there breathing space. The characterization of the Daleks is astounding. It's partly Nick's performance is just breathtaking because you always know who's talking. To have so many different Daleks talking all the time, and yet you can follow what's going on, and for the Daleks to be such major characters with their own machinations, their own plotting, their own politics going on, that was wonderful.
Their own unique personalities.
But also just Paul McGann was just so well written for. It serves so well. So I've listened to that story several times now, and every time I listen to it, if I feel like I need an energy boost that's not going to let up, that's the story I go to. So that's my recommendation. So if you haven't listened to Mutually Assured Destruction, guys, it is worth it. You don't need the rest of Time Lord Victorious. It works on its own. I mean, there's a bit of stuff before and after. There's a little bit of ending that doesn't quite make sense without the whole lot. But listen to our podcast when we release it. It all makes sense. Its context, brilliant.
Very good. Thank you, Philip.
Thank you so much.
Oh, I love it, Lizzie.
That was, it means a lot, that one, because I started off writing for 8th, and I've written more for him than anyone else. And so his voice is so in my brain. And first time for Daleks, it was a huge milestone for me. But yeah, it does serve as a standalone. It is Die Hard in space. I'm with Daleks, which is the best pitch I've ever been given from Matt. And I think my favourite scene that I've ever written is in that with him dancing with the scientist, which is, I mean, just glorious, really fun.
Yeah, I mean, I could have chosen Twisted Folklore from Stranded. I think that's one of the standouts in the whole Stranded box sets.
Do you like that one?
I do.
Yeah, the Grimm fairy tale one. Oh, because again, that was an example of me joining a world that was so well established that I didn't know much about, and having to play catch up like crazy. And yeah, I'm so glad you like that one.
Yeah, and then the other was just the Curse of Lady Macbeth too in the Ninth Doctor stories, because I learned so much that I hadn't realised about what the true story was behind Macbeth and Lady Macbeth. And I went back and it drove me back to do some research, which is what good Doctor Who always makes you go and think, oh, I want to learn more about that. And I actually went looking to find some more of the background that you'd explored in that one. So yeah, anyhow, I could.
Thank you. I'm glad you mentioned that one, because it was my first pitch for Chris Eccleston, and I was aware that he was very keen on choosing his own favourites from all the pitches, and I thought, right, how can I get his attention? And I'd just seen his Macbeth at the RSC, so I knew that was fresh in his mind. I also had the new angle because it's my favourite play. It's my favourite Shakespeare play, and the language is extraordinary.
Yeah.
And I had just seen a lecture in Edinburgh about the real Macbeth, so I didn't know anything about this. And I thought, right, well, I'll pitch it. And then if he's sick of Macbeth, he'll stay away from it. But if he's still got it in his mind and he's interested, then that might hook him in. And obviously it did. But it was a fantastic opportunity to combine two things that I loved. And I got the scribe for it. Oh, they spelled my name wrong on the award. But we won't complain.
Yes, there's still so much more we haven't touched on. But yes, I was going to mention the scribe, so well done for that. That's another amazing award.
Oh, thanks. I brought it up.
Okay, Lizzie, over to you. What would you like to recommend? Doesn't have to be an audio, but of course it can be.
Well, actually, funny you should be talking about wonderful stories that are well researched. I was listening to Helen Goldwyn on one of your episodes recently, and she is the author of one of my favourite audios, which is the one about Mary Anning. And I'm so jealous. It was called Primeval Design. I'm so jealous of her for that, because Mary Anning, it was the first film script I ever wrote, was about Mary Anning, the fossil hunter from Lyme Regis, and she's just kind of undergone a bit of a resurgence because they've just put a statue of her in Lyme Regis. I play the character in Lyme Regis every year, and I've been all fascinated by her as the first female fossil hunter and paleontologist. And Helen has written, I mean, she obviously came across this fabulous character probably the same time as me, and was absolutely enthralled by her and did all the research, but came up with such a brilliant story for Doctor Who. I couldn't have I'm glad it went to her. I'm annoyed, but I'm also glad because she's multi-talented, as we know, Helen, and the fact that she's written such a fantastic audio. If you haven't listened to that one, do, because it's a beautiful story that combines a bit of real life and a bit of sci-fi. So I definitely recommend that. And also I recommend Roy Gill's Red Darkness, because we all wrote for Shades of Fear, and I think his is so powerful and introduces me. Mine kind of sat his up, and I went more with comedy. And then when I listened to his, I kind of thought, yeah, it's one of those instances where I just think I perhaps missed the mark in tone. But I listened to that recently, and I just think it's terrifying. And he's another one that's on that list of genius writers. There are recommendations I could give that are going to be spoilers, though, that I can't mention because the box sets haven't been announced. But there's a story coming up by Tim Foley that you are going to die for.
There's always a story coming up by Tim Foley that we're going to die for.
I know, but you will just, it is so good. I've read the script, and it's one of those scripts you read and you just think, how is this man not making Hollywood movies? I mean, he's just so good. And I already have it as if I've seen it visually in my head. You know, sometimes you read a script and you just think, well, I've seen that now, because it was so beautifully defined. And it's it's going to be incredible. But yeah, look out for that partnership between Tim Foley and John Dorney. I'm writing on the same box set, but it's extremely experimental. And I know that Dorney referred to it in his interview with you guys as well, in terms of, he was talking about different story shapes and breaking rules and telling stories in different ways and messing with time and structure, because he's genius at that. I'm attempting my rewrite for this project, but the project very much relies on that all coming together from a team of writers, and Tim Foley's in this collection is mind-blowing.
And what about you, Dwayne? What are you going to recommend for us?
Well, since we're recommending stories from Lizzie, I should mention The Return of Jo Jones. You wrote a story in that box set. It was lovely to get that different perspective of Jo and the Third Doctor. Your story was The Iron Shore, which was the last story, wasn't it? I think there was a scene in the opening story which was written by Matt Fitton that it brought me to tears. Was she talking about Cliff, which was virtually a tribute to Stuart Bevan?
Oh gosh, yeah.
And it just had me bawling. That doesn't happen too often, but yeah, it was lovely. So that sort of set the tone for the whole box set, which you're a part of. So yeah, definitely a recommend from me.
That box set is fabulous. Yeah, Matt Fitton definitely is on that list of writers that should be snapped up. And no, that was a fun one because it was actually based on Liverpool docks, the wet docks on the old dock road that I used to go down when my dad was working there. And that's what that dock was actually based on. We created an alien planet for it because we didn't want another one set on Earth. But yeah, so that was quite close to home, as was The Miniaturist, actually, because that's set in the mine that my husband worked down when he was a miner. And the whole character of Mick Huff writing for the First Doctor, which I was, thrilled to do, that mine exists and they have a dark matter lab at the bottom of that mine. So it's all based on the true story, apart from the alien bit. But that was a fun one.
I meant to mention The Miniaturist because that box set just blew me away. It was called The Outlaws, wasn't it? And Stephen Noonan's
Liz Miles
new first Doctor is just incredible. Being a fan of that black and white era, I just love what you guys are doing with that era. So thank you for that too. Annette Badlam was great in that story.
Oh, she's a big
very creepy,
wasn't mine. She was in a short film that I did ages ago, which you can find on YouTube, called Jam, and she's in a jam competition, and she's one of those actresses that crosses the line between terrifying and funny all the time. She was amazing in Doctor Who, and now the rest of the world has discovered her, and she's reaching massive heights of fame. And I'm so glad, because she's been a genius for a long time.
Well, she's one of our friends. She really comes on our program.
I wouldn't say regularly.
I think we had it 3 times. I think 3 times isn't too bad.
Oh, we have had it 3 times. That's right. I forgot.
Yeah, I think we can count her as regular.
She was in a Elizabethan Beauty Law. She played Elizabeth I for me on Radio 4. And so she's been, I've written for her a couple of times, Annette Badlam. She's just phenomenal. Her and Angela Bruce, I think. We're talking about women that inspire you. Glenda Jackson was very early on. And Nettie B was one that joined as I grew older, and then became aware of Angela Bruce, who I've now had the wonderful honour of writing for twice. And she's just a goddess. So we're just lucky, aren't we, in this job?
Yeah.
Come in contact with so many heroes, heroines.
Speaking of short films, I came across a short film you wrote called Mr. Fairhurst. Do you remember that?
Oh, yeah, in lockdown.
And I watched that. I think I'm going to put that in the show notes because I think more people should watch it because it's just one guy set in a car and a PE teacher trying to deal with lockdown. Wasn't it? Was that all to do? That was to do with supporting that local community during lockdown, wasn't it? That story. That's why it was written.
It was. It's an amazing company called Not Too Tame, run by James Fairhurst, and we call the teacher after him. We did a show together with his company a little while ago. And we created this character called Mr. Fairhurst, who was a gym teacher who'd been thrown out by his wife, and and we just used to joke about this kind of character. And then it got so prolific, we thought we have to write something about him. We decided it should be a TV script. And then during lockdown, I just decided to go for it and do a short film that Jimmy could film, because he's just a brilliant, brilliant actor. He could film in his car. His brother filmed it. I want to turn it into a TV series starring Mike Wozniak if we can't get Jimmy to do it. I think it would just be such a heartbreaking story, because the amount of kids that had underwent so much trauma during lockdown and had access to computers, and some didn't. Some kids haven't returned to school since lockdown. It was a deeply, deeply traumatic thing for a lot of people. And then you've got this guy who obviously can't live at home, so he's living in his car pretending to, and trying to help. And there's so much humour in that, but it's also quite heartbreaking as well. And I can't believe you saw it. I'm really thrilled. Yeah,
no, it actually had me blubbing a little. There was a scene there where he just broke down, and yeah, I could really. It was really nice. Yeah, it only goes for 7 minutes, so I recommend anyone just jump on. I'll put the link in the description and check it out. Well worth your time investment. So there is one more thing I would like to recommend, and that is a book that I've just finished reading by our good friend John Levine, Philip. I finished his book, Run the Shadows, Walk the Sun, his autobiography.
Me too.
So did you finish it?
I have finished it.
Oh, I want to recommend it because I've been crying a lot over the last recent times, because there's a scene in there. Do you remember the scene?
You did the audiobook though, didn't you?
No, it's not on audiobook. I got it on Kindle, so I read the Kindle version.
Okay,
yeah.
Good. I got his actual hardback.
There was a scene towards the end where he spends a bit of time with his grandson that just absolutely broke my heart. I was sobbing. And if you haven't yet heard our interview with John Levine, which was quite an experience, wasn't it, Philip?
It was a great experience.
Definitely. It wasn't. Yeah, definitely go back and have a listen to it. He's a guy that can cause people to react in ways they may not expect, but definitely read his book. It is definitely well worth the read. He has had such a fascinating life outside of Doctor Who. Doctor Who is just a small fraction of what he's done in his lifetime. However much it has been exaggerated, I don't know, but it's still a fascinating and enjoyable read. So that's John Levine's Walk the Shadows, Run the Sun. No, is that right? Walk the Shadows. Hang on. Read it the right way. You've got the book.
Yeah, it's
in front
Run the Shadows, Walk the Sun.
That's right.
So
Run the Shadows.
When it's cold, you run, and then when it's warm, you take time and enjoy it.
That's right.
So,
that's the story of his life.
Little possibility thing too is just watch this space. For those people in Australia, there may be an opportunity to meet John early next year.
That's right. He was coming this year, but he had to put it off due to some surgery that he had.
I've progressed beyond you, Dwayne, that you don't know about, which I haven't talked to you about.
Yeah, I'm sure there's lots of things you haven't talked to me about.
More than likely. We were just talking about Katie Manning earlier today, and of course, Katie Manning will be appearing in Melbourne and Sydney. If you haven't got your tickets for the Science Audience, Katie Manning, make sure you get them. It's selling out fast, actually.
Yes. Yeah, it's going like hotcakes in Melbourne. I'm surprised.
Melbourne's great. Well done, Melbourne.
Wow.
They're fantastic. Good on you. All right. Thank you once again, Lizzie. We really appreciate you for joining us for so long. I have to break it to you though. It is now time to stop procrastinating and get back to your draft.
Oh no! Oh no! I'm sure there's some cleaning in the house I can do. There must be.
Anything but writing.
That's the only reason that, a bunch of us Big Finish writers got together to do a sponsored run a little while ago. We did a 10K.
Yeah.
It's the only reason we did that. It wasn't cancer research. No, the only reason we're getting fit, it was so we had an excuse not to write.
Don't believe you.
It's true. Guys, it's been an absolute pleasure.
It has been. Thank you so much.
And Philip, I love you too.
I love you too, mate.
Oh, well, I'm going to start crying again in a second. All right, until next time, we'll catch you all later.
Bye, everyone.
This has been the Sirens of Audio episode 163, Happy Horror Heroes, with our guest Lizzie Hopley and your hosts Philip Edney and Dwayne Bunny. Original theme music composed by Joe Kramer. More about us and tickets to Katie Manning in Australia from sirensofaudio.com. Comment below to let us know what you thought of the episode, or contact us via email at sirensofaudio@gmail.com or via any one of our socials. Thanks for listening, audiophiles. We'll hear you next time.